Hello and welcome back to this course. In this video, we are going to start working with private and protected instance and class attributes. So what are private and protected instance and class attributes? Well, we know what attributes are already, and we know what instance attributes are and what class attributes are, right? So we say that instance attributes are those attributes that are peculiar to the individual objects of the class, and the class attributes are the attributes that are general to all the class. So now the word private and the word protected, they are basic English words. So when something is protected, you know that this is protected, and when something is private, you know what it means. So why do we have to make our attributes protected or private? Now let's take, for instance, let's look at our class again. We have this person here as an object of this class person, and we can access the value of color of this person. We can also access the height. So if we say person dot height, we can see it. If we print it, we have the height for this person. And if we say person dot color, if we print it, we see the color for this person, right? So also if we remove all of this and we say person dot, we can see we have the height. Okay, so now I'm going to undo that. So the reason we have to make these attributes private is that there are some time in your program that you do not want these attributes to be accessed outside of your class or to be modified outside of your class. Because if I want to reset the value of this color here, I can write person dot color. I will set it to blue. I'm going to comment out all of this, and here I'm going to print person dot color. And again, after this, I'm going to print the same thing. So I'm going to copy this and paste here. So we can see that here, the value of the color of this person here is red, and the color of this person here is blue because we have reassigned it. Okay, so let's say that for some reasons, you do not want anybody to be able to modify the value of anything. So I can even modify the height from here, and I can modify it to anything. So let's say 30, and I print the height again. You see that our height that was originally 5.5 will now be changed to 30, right? Now, for the sake of this video, we are going to create another class. So I'm going to write my class keyword. I'm going to create a car class. So I'm going to close this. And there is something that is very common to all cars. So I'm going to say that, well, every car should have at least 4 wheels, right? So I'm going to say number of wheels, so that is going to be our class attribute. So number of wheels, and I'm going to set it to 4, right? So this is general to all the cars. Now I'm going to now define my init function. So, and I'm going to say underscore underscore init, and Python has already completed that for us. So now I'm going to pass in all the attributes that I think our car class should have. So the first attributes that I'm going to pass here is going to be model. So all cars might not be of the same model. Another thing I might assign is number of seaters and probably color, right? So these are the things that are peculiar to cars. So I'm going to say self dot model is equals model. So my equal sign, and I'm going to say self dot number of seaters. So I'm going to use that, and I'll assign it to number of seaters. Now we also have self dot color color. So now there is something I would want to point out, that you can call this self dot anything, right? So that inside your program, when you say print self dot call, right? So let's say you are printing this, then what is going to be available is the parameter that was passed in as color, right, at the place of instantiation. So it doesn't have to be exactly the same thing, but then it is good to use the exact same thing, right, so that you not have yourself confused. So I'm going to assign this properly, and now we have defined our init function. So the next thing that I'm going to do, well, we have already done this before. I'm going to create some of the methods. So I'm going to define one method. So, and I'm going to call it description, and I'm going to pass in self. So now this self will get all of the things we have here in the init function. So now I'm just going to write a print statement that says, so I'm going to format my string and I'm going to write that this self dot model car is, I'll pass in myself dot color, and I'll pass in number of sitters, so self dot number of sitters, and has, now we are assessing the number of wheels. So I'm just going to write the class name dot number of wheels. So now, so we are going to create an instance of this car. So I'm going to say maybe car one, and I'm going to set it to be an instance of the car class, and the model is Toyota, and the number of seaters is maybe 7 seaters. So, and the color is ash. So I'm just going to write ash. So if I call this function on this car one, so I'll say car one dot description. So it should give me all the information about car one. So you see that this Toyota car is ash with 7. Well, I'm going to add seaters here. So, and I'm going to write that again. So you see, so this Toyota is ash with 7 seaters and has 4 wheels. So I'm going to add my wheels. So I'm going to clear that. But I believe basically you've understood what is happening here. So we have that this Toyota is ash with 7 seaters and has 4 wheels. So I'm going to comment out my other print statements. Assuming I want to modify the number of wheel, I can say that car one dot number of wheels becomes 8, right? So if I call that description again, so car one dot description, you see that the value of seaters will now change. So now we have this. Okay, we are using the class name here, so that is why we still have the number of wheels to be 4, the original 4. So we can change this to self dot number of wheels. This will still work. So we can change it to self dot number of wheel, and now we can have this as a generic value for the number of wheels of car one. So now if we run this, so now we see that the number of wheels of this car one has been reassigned, but we do not want that. Okay, we do not want this value to be able to change. So how can we achieve that? Well, we can achieve that by making this class attribute protected. So if you add this underscore, these attributes will now be protected. So as you can see, if you, now that I'm just calling number of wheels here, I can no longer access that value unless I change it to this, right? Protected by adding one underscore in front of all of them, right? So now Python is giving us a signal that these items here are no longer the items that we had before. So if we want to access it, the only thing we can do is to use this. Okay, so if we decide to access any of these variables individually, so I'm just going to write a print statement that will try to access the protected class. So if I want to print car1 dot number of wheels, so the only time you can do that is to add the underscore, but it is not recommended that you access a protected attribute outside, whether class or insert attribute outside of the class, right? So you can access them, you can reassign them, but it is not good to do that. So as a developer, whenever you see that an attribute is protected in a class, it is recommended that you do not access them or reassign them outside of the class. So as you can see, if I remove this print statement here and I set this to be equals 10 and I print this over here again, you see that this value is going to change. Okay, so I'm going to call the description class here again. So we see that the value is going to change. Okay, so we are getting this because I've not changed the color to the private car's color. So I'm going to clear this and I am going to print this again. So okay, so now we are getting this also because of this. So now I'm going to print this again. So now we have the value of wheel is now 10, although it's protected. Now, if for any reason I want to make it totally private, so to make it private, when you make it private, even when you want to access it as a developer from outside of the class, Python is not going to allow you. So how can we achieve that? We can achieve that by adding double underscore to this. So if we add double underscore to all of that, Python understands that this has now become protected. So I am not even going to bother about their values. So I'm going to just change all of this, and I am going to try to access them individually from outside of the class. So, and I'm going to access all of them individually from outside of the class. Now, what I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to reassign a protected class attributes. So we are going to get a lot of errors because even if we want to print them out, so here we are printing them out by calling this method outside of the class, and here we are reassigning them. So in any ways, it is not going to work. So we have a lot of errors. So we are seeing that, okay, so first of all, we are having this error. So I'm going to correct that. And now, we are seeing that this reassignment is not working. Okay, we are trying to reassign this to 8 and 10. So this reassignment is not working. It is having the original number, right? So, but if I just want to print all of this, so I'm going to remove this. So this description is printing because we are not accessing them directly. We are using a function to access them. So if I want to print their individual values, so I'm going to remove all of this and I'm going to print car1, right, dot underscore underscore model, and we're also going to repeat that for all of them. Okay, so we are going to change this to a double underscore color. Then the next one we change to number of seaters, and the next one we change to number of wheels, right? So, and I'm going to try to print this. So we can see that car dot underscore underscore model does not exist. Okay, so it's not because this does not exist. What happens is that Python internally renames this to something else. So even though you are seeing that the name here is underscore underscore model, Python has now renamed it to something else, so that even when you try to access it as this, it will give you an error. Okay, so now that is how to create private and protected class attributes. So now, how do you now access these class attributes that are private? Well, you can access it by using functions, so that when you call the functions, then the function can now access them for you. And we can reassign them by using functions. So now these functions that we can use to access or reassign them, they are called getters and setters. So I'm going to clear the terminal. I'm going to rename this function to get description, and set. The keyword get and set are used to access protected and private class attributes. So if I call this get description, so I'm going to say car1 dot get description. Well, we have been accessing it, so it is still going to access it for us. All right, but if we can decide that, okay, we remove this. So instead of this print statement, we're just going to return self dot color, self dot model, then self dot number of seaters, and then self dot number of wheels. So by this, you can easily get them. So if you want to know what their values are, then you have to like print the values, and this is the right way to access protected and private class attributes. So if we print this now, we can see that we have all of that printed for us. So thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you in the next one.